today to talk about being a court herald in the MidRealm and how to run a royal court. This does not cover the parts where you actually raise your voice and yell. There are other classes to cover that sort of thing. This class is about paperwork. And so part of that is paperwork that you sort of handle on your own. And part of that is paperwork that you that is done through the MidRealm website. And that has changed in the last year or so. And so I'm going to run through an actual court report. There are enough court reports sitting in the system that we can, and some test ones in there that we can go and we can add people into and stuff. So we can see how that all works. So anybody else want to introduce themselves? Being stalked by a ringer here. Dimitri is logged in.
Marketa, I've been around for 5 or 6 or so years.
Hi, Marketa.
Bounced to Ayrton.
And what's your interest? Are you interested in becoming a court herald?
Sure.
Oh, excellent. All right. And I see Clara's there. She's still muted. And Dimitri, I'm not sure Dimitri's actually here, but it doesn't look like he's got, he might not be in yet. I don't know. All right. So how to run a royal court. So I've got a handout here, and I'll make this available on the YouTube channel once this is all uploaded. And if people want to see to see it afterwards, we can do that as well. So I'll share my screen, and we'll do this. There we go. All right. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the front, to the top. And I'm going to do.
I see redlining.
Yeah, I'm turning it off. I don't remember how to turn this off, honestly. So
with the track changes, I think you just tell it to stop tracking changes. It's a toggle.
yeah, you'd think. Doesn't look like it's doing it though. So that's all right. You all can see the changes. These changes are changes that I had to make in order to, you know, I had Estelle review it for me, and she's been a herald for a long time. So, all right. So, so running a royal court. So it can be intensive, right? Running a royal court, depending on how many awards there are, who the royalty are, your familiarity with them, your familiarity with the awards, whatever. You're a stage manager, but you're also one of the performers because you're called upon to act as the voice of the crown for part of the court, but not all of the court. So it can be really stressful, and people can get can have problems. And so it's helpful to know how to be prepared for things starting up. You know, there we go. It's important to be prepared from a paperwork perspective so that you can concentrate on getting the theater part of it done without having to worry about whether or not you've got a pen or paper or whatever. And so that way you're prepared, and once you're prepared, then you're good to go. And then you can concentrate on the theater part of it. So there's 4 parts. You got to prepare yourself. You have to organize the court. You're going to perform the court, which is the part that we don't cover in this class. And then you're going to report on the court. So we're going to cover steps 1, 2, and 4. So the preparation outside of your mental preparation is the organizational preparation. You're going to want some binders. One's going to have your book of ceremonies. One's going to have your court binder. Your book of ceremonies holds all of the stuff, and there's a link for the book of ceremonies below. There's a link for the book of ceremonies in the handout here. But you're going to want to have that book of ceremonies because just in case the royalty say at the last second after you're already out there, oh, by the way, I want to put Bob over there on vigil, you have the ceremony sitting in your book. Your court binder generally sits empty until you've got something to put into it. I personally, when I am the herald in charge and have enough notice, I like to script the courts out. Not everybody has that opportunity, and everybody has that inclination. So whatever works best for you is what you should do. But I script everything out from start to finish so that unless there is a change at the last second, I have it all written down for me from soup to nuts, and there's nothing for me to miss. You know, I have been known to bring my laptop and my printer to events so that I can make last minute changes and print them out again anyway. During Seto Inez's reign, there was a lot of scripted content that was not traditional MidRealm content that we wrote specifically for their reign. So I printed out a bunch of that kind of stuff too. There's a Pursuivants Handbook. This handbook is for heralds in general, but it does include several sections on running court. While there is an item in there about, a section in there about setting up the thrones, for the most part, the royal household or the royal staff is dedicated to throne setup or court setup, so you usually don't have to be dedicated to that, but it's always good to know how that stuff gets set up so that in case something happens and you end up being called to do that work, you're able to do it. And so there's a section about setting up the court and who's in the, you know, their majesties are in the middle, and then you have their highnesses to one side and the landed baronesses and barons and baronesses to the other, and they alternate for precedence potentially throughout, you know, the court until we've had courts where there have been, you know, all of the baron and baronesses are sitting up there in court, and so the court's very, very wide, right? There is a section in there on that. There's also a MidRealm Book of Ceremonies. That's the book that I talked about. Print the whole thing out. It's helpful to print out additional specific pages. You can print out additional copies of the Oaths of Fealty for all of the 4 bestowed peerages. You can print out a copy of the Oath of Fealty for landed barons and baronesses. You can print out the Oath of Fealty for the populace. Those are the ones that you generally will be called upon to do. The royal peer oath is usually only used at coronation, although every once in a while, maybe you might get one in a court. The elevation ceremonies for all 4 of the bestowed peerages, and the sort of generic award verbiage for all of the awards, which I can practically do by heart, and I'm sure a lot of us can. We, Felix and Madalena, King and Queen by right of arms of the Middle Kingdom, having heard of the good deeds of Marquetta of Ayrton, are minded to make unto her a purple fret, done this 3rd day of June, AS 55, in our canton of Foxville. See? And all I needed is a seneschal, and if I had a seneschal, you'd have a purple fret. Print them out. There's also something called the Heralds Field Book, which you can find in the MidRealm library as well, and we'll go explore that here in a couple of minutes, so you can show you where those things are. The Heralds Field Book is a made-for half-page print-out copy of certain aspects of the Book of Ceremonies. So it's about yay big, as opposed to being 8.5 by 11. It's like 8.5 by 11 turned sideways and then cut in half. And it's formatted to fit on that side, that space. And it includes a lot of this stuff. It includes a lot more, honestly, than just these 5 or 6 or 10 things. But it's another book to carry around. If you feel like you like it, then by all means, utilize it. I have found it helpful in the past when I haven't been able to print stuff out. So certainly it's something that you can carry around that's a little bit smaller than the entire Book of Ceremonies. And then one thing that I found that is key is that all this stuff ends up getting printed out on loose leaf paper, and you put it into a binder. Get the plastic protector sheets and run them through the put them in the plastic protector sheets. They're easier to move from one book to another that way, and you don't tear them out. And you then have to either reprint them or go and find those. I don't even know if they sell them anymore, but they certainly used to when I was in high school and middle school. The little little portable holes, right? You would glue to the paper. It's not enough to just print these things out. You need to read them. Most people struggle reading on the fly. I'm reading as part of my sort of, COVID quarantine activity. I'm reading the Aeneid 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes as many as 4 times a week, and I'm reading it blind. I've never read this translation before. I know what the story is, of course. I have read the Aeneid before, but I've never read this version before. And, if you don't read it in advance, you're going to stumble. And I stumble all the time. For the purposes of reading the Aeneid to, the 3 people who pay attention to my videos online, that's fine. But when you're in court, you want to know what you're saying. So don't just have these documents printed out. Read them. Get to become familiar with them. Because some of them you will be called on to repeat over and over again. and you don't want to stumble. All right. So now, as I say, most people don't bring a laptop and printer to events. So there are certain docs that you're going to want to bring with you in addition to your book of ceremonies. You're going to want your court checklist and your fill-in court sheet. And we can go and take a look at these here in just a couple of minutes. As soon as I get to the end of this section, we'll go and we'll look at all of these documents, so that you can see all of them, where they are and what they look like on the website. So if you're not obsessive like me, right, and you don't bring a laptop and printer, you're going to bring some sort of pad of paper, lined. Probably want lined paper. You want to bring as many pens and pencils as you can reasonably carry around with you. And then you're going to want to practice the names of the royalty that you're heralding for, and anybody who might be called into court to sit on the podium. Barons and baronesses, prince and princess, royalty from visiting kingdoms. You may be called upon to call off to herald in the local barons and baronesses. There may be a back of court herald to do that at events where we have all of the baronages show up, right? Events where, like crown or coronation, where you know there's going to be a lot of barons and baronesses, you may want to ask another herald to act as the back of court herald, specifically to herald in and out the barons and baronesses of who are there, because that's potentially 40 names. That's a lot, 38 names now. But it's a lot of names, and you have to know the names of the baronies, right? And having somebody at the back makes it easier, because it's easier to tell when the next person should start when you're at the back as opposed to when you're at the front. But you don't want to stumble, and you don't want to mispronounce people's names. Some people are more touchy about that than others. Don't ever pronounce Catrin's name. Don't ever mispronounce Catrin's name, right? Because Edmund doesn't like it. Practice the date of the event, right? It's June 3rd, Anno Societatis 55. Scrolls are dated AS, not CE. So it's not June 6, 2020. It's June 6, AS 55, or Anno Societatis. And that's how you pronounce that, Anno Societatis, okay? So now let's, I'll stop sharing here for just a second, and I'm going to go to the website. We'll share the website, and we can look at these documents. So we'll share the screen, and we'll go to the other, there, we'll go to that one. Okay, so now we're sharing the Middle Kingdom website, and all of these documents are stored here. All of the URLs changed when we moved to the new system, so that was exciting. I got to go through and redo the entire doc here. So I'm going to bring these up as individual tabs, and then I'll also show you how to actually find them in the library. So these will give you downloads of PDFs, okay? These links directly will directly download them as PDFs for you. So we'll just do that right now. We'll just download one of them so that you can see it. So that's the Pursuivants Handbook. So this includes all the information about being a herald in general. This is everything. Reporting, field heraldry, book heraldry, court heraldry. I expect the reporting section is probably well out of date. This is a good 18 years old. This edition, I need to go and check to make sure that this is the edition that we're currently using, because I'm honestly not sure. I thought that the Pursuivants Handbook had come out, but I can't remember. And then there's a Book of Ceremonies. Book of Ceremonies is here. Okay, this has been redone as of 2017. And this includes all of the ceremonial stuff. So this is key court herald stuff. This is all very important, right? And you know, it has all of the data in here, everything that you will need. It gives you information on processional. It gives you information on boasting. There's a section here on alternate titles that people like to use. These are approved by the SCA, I think. There are some others that are not included here. There are some that are traditional for the MidRealm that are not listed in here. Baron under the mountain is a very old traditional MidRealm term for the king. And so that's something that I used a lot for William and his old. and Dimitri as well. Dimitri was there more than I was, I think. But we use that for William is Old Baron Under the Mountain was one that we used a lot. William really liked that. Here's something to note: when you copy and paste stuff out of the Book of Ceremonies, and you like paste it into a Word doc, it's all weird. Here, I'm just going to share the desktop now at this point. Share the screen. See, you can see it does not translate well.
Formatting for Hills.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's just something to keep in mind. If you're gonna actually print stuff out and script stuff out and print stuff out, you're gonna have to reformat stuff. But become familiar with these. If you want to be a court herald, these are things that you're gonna want to track on, things that you're gonna want to focus on as you continue to do more heralding in the MidRealm. So that's the Pursuivants Handbook and the Book of Ceremonies, and then we talked about these two documents: the court checklist and the fill-in court sheet. And what just happened? Okay. Copy and go here. Oh, that didn't work. I see what happened. Okay, that's going to save that. We'll open it. This is the checklist for court. So these are the things that you're going to want to look at. And a lot of that stuff is here in this presentation as well, but it's good to have a nice one-pager that you can use for everything. After court, this section is incorrect, so don't follow this part. This is not the way you do it anymore, but we'll get to that in a minute. These are all good, relatively good steps for getting ready for court. Find the signet, look at the scrolls, check names, check for what we now call the gloss. I call it the gloss. It's the printed out non-calligraphy version on the back of the scroll, because sometimes you can't read the calligraphy that you're looking at. Assist with text for blank scrolls if necessary. I don't know, that doesn't happen very much anymore, but every once in a while it does. Get a copy of the court list, and we'll talk about this, but this checklist is a good list to have and to refer to. And then the other one is the fill-in court sheet. And this is good if you are, this is particularly helpful if you are not printing anything out at all, right? Because you need to remember a bunch of this stuff for, the court. And actually, I'm not sure that this is the right form now that I think about it. There might be a different one. But this has the event, the estimated time of the court, the boast, and the introductions. I don't think that's enough space to write a boast or an introduction, but some people can write smaller than I do. What this does not include are things that you need for your report: the seneschal, the signet, who else was on the dais, and the other heralds who worked with you. So these are things that go in here as well. But this does give you a base order of court business form to use, and you can write those in here if you're going to do it that way. Okay. So now, when you get to there we go. So now you printed your stuff out and you've gotten to your event, and you have all your binders and you got your supplies and your pens, and you get to the event, you pay in at the gate. You're going to have a series of things that you need to do sort of immediately as the herald in charge, right? Find out where the royalty room is. Find out where the scribes room is. Find out where you need to put your stuff. You can't always put your stuff in the royalty room. It's not always available to you. And you can't assume that it's going to be, okay? It's not always, the royalty room is for the royalty, not for the herald necessarily. Most of the time there's usually space. You're going to need to be in there at some point anyway for the pre-court meeting, but it's not always for you. And so you need to go and find a place to put your stuff. And then you need to find out what kind of courts there are, where they are, and when they are. So there are 3 different kinds of court that we have come to use in the MidRealm most often. There are field courts, which are courts where the royalty are sort of roaming about and moving about the event, and they give awards as they go from place to place. Those can happen earlier in the day. Frequently, they will happen very early in the day, like maybe even before the tournaments start or right after the tournaments start. And so if you want to be there and be able to assist your royalty for that, you need to be there early. But a field court is where they're walking around. So your seneschal will walk with you, and usually the royal staff, like the champions, will walk with you, and their majesties go where their majesties want to go, and then they'll stop and they'll say, Herald, open our court. And you'll open the court and you'll do whatever it is that you're giving out. Frequently, it's when you're giving a red company to somebody at an event where there's a lot of melee stuff. They'll do that on the field. They do bronze rings and Cavendish knots at the fencing list frequently. They'll do archery awards, the greenwood and the barb at the archery field. So they'll wander around. And sometimes they like to do that in front of the community of people that the award is particularly relevant for. So that's one kind of court. Another kind of court is silent court. When the royalty know that somebody isn't showing up, or there is something happening that is secret, or the person who's getting the award is particularly anti-public displays of appreciation, you can do a silent court. And so that court can be done in the royalty room. You need a seneschal and a herald and their majesties, and you just sort of read the awards out. It is most often used for awards where they were supposed to be given in court earlier that day, and then people weren't there. So, you call out their name, they're not there. Okay, we're going to hold on to that one, and then, either you do it right there, and then it's not in silent court, or you can hold the award and do it later in silent court. Or if you know that they're not going to show up, you can do it in silent court early in the day. There are other reasons for that. Sometimes if somebody's getting, if there's some sort of disciplinary action taking place that somehow ends up being relevant to their majesties, that can happen there. Sometimes people who are resigning a position feel like they want to do it in private, and sometimes that has to happen in court. It depends on the thing. But usually it's for awards for people who aren't there. And then there's formal court. And formal court is the thing that's like church, where we all go in and we bow to the empty furniture, and everybody sits down facing in one direction, except for the royalty and the staff and whoever's sitting up there with them, who are facing out at you. And then it's all about awards and presentations and commendations and all of that stuff. All three kinds of court require a warranted herald and a warranted seneschal. So if for some reason the royalty give out an award in the middle of the day and they don't have a herald and a seneschal with them, you have to redo that award in silent court, either later that day or the next morning or whatever. But you got to do it in an official court, because it can't be reported if you don't have all that information. You have to have a warranted herald and you have to have a warranted seneschal. And obviously you have to have the royalty. Everybody else is extra and not required. You obviously want an audience, and you obviously want the people who are getting their awards. But all you need to give awards is one royal, a seneschal, and a herald. You can do it on the phone if you want to. So find out what kind of courts there are. Find the event steward. Tell them who you are, that you're in charge of the herald for the event. Ask them to have the site herald cry to sight for anybody who has business with the crown. So that's gifts to the crown of largesse, like directly, not to the people who happen to be wearing the crowns, but gifts to the kingdom, essentially. So coins to hand out at Pennsic, or award medallions, or donations to the Royal Travel Fund, which can't be accepted by the crown, but can be accepted by an exchequer in their presence in court. But ask them to cry to sight for people who have business with the crown, and either have them fill out a form that you've left at the gate, or have those people come and find you. Sometimes you're well known, like Dimitri's well known, so you could say, hey, I'm Dimitri, have them come find me, and people will know to go find the guy with the great big voice that you can hear 3 football fields over. But if you're not as well known, then you can say, I've left a form at the gate, please have people fill out what their presentation is at the gate. Then you got to remember to go back and get it, so don't forget. So you're going to also ask the event steward if they know who the seneschal for court will be. I've gotten tripped up multiple times by forgetting seneschals. it's hard to remember. Ended up building my own form for it because the other forms didn't completely exist. But I built my own template for it in my court scripting stuff. And so I have that stuff in there in my own personal form. And I've got to go find the other form because I'm sure that there's a form on the MidRealm page that has a slot for the seneschal and a slot for the signet and a slot for the other heralds. But you ask them who the seneschal is going to be. If they don't have a seneschal for court, like if they don't say, oh, the baronial seneschal is over there, or oh, here's our local seneschal, it's your responsibility. It may be simply your responsibility to say, hey, your majesties, I don't know that we have a seneschal, and they'll say, oh, Bob's doing it, and then you're fine. But it also may be your job to go and find that person. At Rose Tourney for Seto and Inez, back before we were all confined to our homes, I had to roam around the site for about an hour and a half looking for a seneschal, and was unable to find one, actually. A particular seneschal is who I was looking for, but I was unable to find a seneschal for a while until we finally located somebody. And then ask the event steward if they've got anybody who wants to be a deputy herald. Now, already we've got the Pale Herald process, right? So if you join the Herald, the unofficial MidRealm College of Heralds and Scribes Facebook page, you can get put on a list that Dimitri, who's here, administers. And that list is the list of warranted court heralds. And the process is about to change, but I don't know the details, so I'm not going to go into it. But basically, you get warranted by the crown to hold court, to be allowed to run royal courts. You don't have to be on this, you don't have to be warranted by the crown to participate as a herald in a court. But if you're going to file court reports, you have to be specifically warranted as an at-large court herald to do that. So Dimitri, when we have in-person courts, which of course isn't happening right now, Master Dimitri's job is to post on that thing and send out an email. And the post says, hey, here are the courts coming up. Here's where we need heralds. Who wants to herald? And then he takes volunteers. And the same thing goes for the email. And so people will get assigned as the primary, and then frequently enough people will volunteer that we'll get some secondaries in there as well. I always like to ask the seneschal if the local herald wants to be involved, just because I think it's a good idea for people to get experience, especially baronial heralds. Frequently, baronial heralds are people who are picked to be baronial heralds because you can't find anybody to fill the office, or because they're very eager and they want to do more, and so they need experience. And running baronial court is not the same thing as running kingdom court. Baronial court, you probably know everybody in the room. Baronial court, you see your baron and baroness on a regular basis. You know, baronial heralds do baronial court monthly sometimes even more than that. There are groups where they hold baronial court, you know, at meetings sometimes, and the herald does that. Kingdom court is different. Kingdom court, the stakes are higher. So it's a good idea to get people that experience of being involved in those things before they are suddenly called upon to run a royal court. So if they have any assistance, then you're good to go. It is generally not a good idea to try to do a royal court all by yourself, because even if you've got the stamina of a bull, stuff happens. And if you strain your vocal cords or hurt yourself or have a choking fit or whatever, you know, you're holding up court until somebody else can get up there for you, for example. Or you can't speak at all, and now you're in trouble, and what happens? And how do you deal with that? If you've got a deputy, you can turn to the deputy and say, hey, help me out. You know, and so always have a backup, because if you have a problem, you need somebody up there who can take over for you. All right, now that you found the event steward, your next step is to find the royal chamberlain or the head retainer for the day. Usually the way you do that is by going to the royalty room and saying, hey, does anybody know where the chamberlain or the head retainer is at? Somebody should be able to tell you, hopefully, if things are organized. You want to make sure that they know that you're there. You're a key piece of the event for their majesties. They need to know that you're there. So when you get with the chamberlain and the head retainer, you're going to ask them, when can I meet with their majesties? Do I need to meet with their majesties before the pre-court meeting? Right? When can I start looking at scrolls and glosses, or when can you start looking at scrolls and glosses? And will there be any courts outside of the main evening court that's being held, right? Field courts, silent courts. And then ask them about the timing and the location. Ask them about the timing and the location for the pre-court meeting. Sorry, my hounds are disruptive. You need to know all of this stuff, and the head retainer is your best bet for finding out almost all of it. Okay, so now you've talked to the Chamberlain, and they say, oh, their majesties are here right now. Why don't you go and sit down with them now? Their majesties will probably have a printout of some kind of the orders of the awards in the order that they want. I have seen this done as primitively as literally crayon on like Burger King takeout bags turned inside out, and you're writing with the crayon through the grease, all the way up to William and Isolde, who had a complicated system of spreadsheets and emails, and everything got sent out in advance, and everybody knew what was going on ahead of time. You showed up with the court. If you were the court herald in charge, you likely showed up at the event with the list already being given to you. Either way, somewhere they're going to have a list of awards in the order that they want them to be given in, because sometimes they don't do it in order of precedence. Sometimes order of precedence is boring, right? So they will mix things up. Sometimes they've got multiple peerages. They'll do one peerage at the beginning, one peerage at the end. Or maybe they've got three, and so they're going to do one in the middle. Maybe they've got something else that they want to do. Maybe they've got announcements that they need to make. So you're going to talk to them about all this stuff. A list of awards in the order that they wish. Preference about when they want you to start reading the scroll text. So you call somebody into court. You know, their majesties call Clara, Lady Clara, into court. Clara stands up and starts walking forward. Do you start reading the scroll text when Clara stands up? Do you start reading the scroll text when she starts walking? Do you start reading the scroll text when she gets to the bottom of the stairs? Or do you start reading the scroll text when she kneels? That's a personal preference, and it depends on the crown. What is their preference about missing recipients? Do you want to ask somebody, do you want to ask for someone to accept for them? Which frequently happens when you're in a barony and you're giving awards to people who live in the barony. The local baron and baron will be sitting in court. So if somebody's not there, the local baron and baroness can accept the award for them, and then they'll present the award in their own baronial court at some point later, right? So what's the preference on that? Do you want to do it that way, or do we do shh? Do we read the scroll into court and do shh, or do we say, we're not going to talk about this at all, we're going to handle it later, shh, right? What are the different rules? So they have a preference. Do they prefer Huba, or do they prefer Yasha, which is the current one, or do they prefer Yorokobi Masho, or do they prefer something else? You know, King Edmund, during his last reign, started off with Huba, and about halfway through the reign started saying, you know what, we're not going to do that kind of cheer. We're going to stand up out of our thrones, and we're going to turn the award recipient around, and we're going to say, for the newest evergreen of the Middle Kingdom. And then people would pick their own cheer. And that has a lot to do with the etymological history of Huba and the apocryphal myth that goes with it about why the MidRealm says that. And you can look that up on the MidRealm Wikipedia, or we can talk about it later if people want to. Okay. I see. Yes, don't call Edmund Edward. Dimitri says that his inbound audio doesn't work, and so he's on chat only. He can hear us, but he can't talk, which must be really, really frustrating for Dimitri. I know it would be really, really frustrating for me. All right, and then who else will be on the dais? Their highnesses, their excellencies, foreign royalty, other landed barons and baronesses. I mean, technically, the royalty may invite anybody to sit on the dais that they wish. Traditionally, it is sitting royalty or landed barons and baronesses. And that's it. But theoretically, they could choose somebody else if they wanted to. Maybe their kid will be sitting in court with them on a tiny little chair, right? That's happened. You can do that. All right. Now that you've met with their majesties and you've got their list of requirements / demands, you now need to go find the signet. If you're lucky, the signet is in the scroll room, which, if you're lucky, is either right next to or is in the royalty room, so that you don't have to traipse around going back and forth between different places. Go and find the signet. Make sure that their court list matches your court list. I've had that happen before too. People, things get mixed up and things get lost, and people, things get added and removed. So make sure that both court lists match. If they don't match, it's not your job to make the decision. It's not the signet's job to make the decision. It's Their Majesty's job to make the decision. But make sure that the awards, that the list matches and the order matches. Review each scroll to make sure that you can either read the calligraphy, right? Because sometimes you can, or there's a gloss on the back. If you cannot read it and there's not a gloss on the back, ask for the signet to generate a gloss for you. Hopefully they can read it too. Worst case scenario, you use the generic text for that award, right? And again, I can repeat it again if anybody wants, but I don't think we need to do that again. You should have an idea about what that is anyway. And so if you cannot read it at all, or it's in a foreign language and they haven't provided you with a translation, right? Maybe you can read the gloss phonetically if you think you know the language well enough, but you're still going to want to say something about how the person's getting a whatever award. Practice everybody's names. Practice everybody's names. All those names on the backs of on all those scrolls, those each are a person. This may be the only award that they ever get. It might be their AOA, it might be Purple Fret, but either way, it might be a whatever, it could be anything. But it might be the only time they ever get an award. So you want to try to do your best to get their name right. If you are confused about the pronunciation, try and find somebody to ask. Local barons and baronesses are a great resource for that. But you want to go and you want to try and get their name right as much as you possibly can. Because again, this is their thing. For this 30 seconds or minute or whatever, it's their thing. The focus is on them, and you don't want the focus to be people laughing at how badly you messed up their name if you can avoid it. The other thing that is a thing that we usually do, although it doesn't happen in every court, is get a list of the scribes' names, because you're going to read out the names of the scribes at the end of court. Maybe Their Majesties will have them stand up, maybe they won't, but Their Majesties would like to thank the following scribes, and you just read the list. Get the list of names. Make sure that you can pronounce those names too. And then start working with the signet to fill out the court sheet and the checklist, so you end up with one authoritative source, okay? If you're really, really organized and Their Majesties are really, really organized and they don't make lots of changes and you print stuff out in advance, you don't necessarily have to worry about making, like changing things. You may end up adding things, like the signet's name or the seneschal's name. You likely won't know that stuff in advance. But you're going to work with the signet to make sure that everything's correct and you've got one authoritative source that you both work off of. Then you check back in with the event steward to see if they have found you any of the information that you need, and to find out if anybody's come to them with business for the court. They may have business for the court, right? And then you're going to make that list as well. This has all happened before the pre-court meeting, okay? You've had a cursory conversation with Their Majesties, but you've not gone over the order of things with Their Majesties yet. Your authoritative source still requires their approval, okay? And then you're going to prepare a boast. Boasts don't have to be big and flowery and long and poetic and inspiring. It can simply be, all rise for the court of their Royal Majesties, Felix and Madalena, King and Queen of the MidRealm, and for their highnesses of the MidRealm, Bob and Linda, and for, usually you're going to invite in Their Majesties, Their Highnesses, and whoever the local baron and baroness are, if there are any, right? So it would be Their Majesties, Felix and Madalena, Their Highnesses, X and X, and Their Excellencies of Arrington, Gareth and Hillary. And then there'll be a pause. And if there are any other visiting royalty, you'll call them in. And if there are any other visiting landed barons and baronesses, you'll call them in, okay? But it can be just that. It does not have to be a big deal. People get fraught about this, and it's just not, it isn't necessary to do. Yes, there are some royalty who don't like it. There are royalty who don't want you to write big flowery things about them. Rongvaler always used to tell me, it's not about me, it's about Lisa. Write about Lisa. Write about Lisa. Write about Lisa. And I'm like, you're the king. at some point we got to say something about you, right? But he didn't like that, so I didn't do it. Other people do like it, right? And it depends on how they feel about their persona, right? So for Seto, it was Shepherd of Fire and Dragon King and Shogun, right? So we would use different terms for him. And sometimes if you're good, you can make this stuff up on the fly. You know, I tend to write boasts on the fly for Hillary and Gareth when they're coming into court. I usually try to make them a little funny. I usually blame Hillary for the weather, but I'm not the Herald anymore, so the new Herald is going to do it differently. But you can do that sort of stuff if you know whoever is running the court, if you know them well enough. But you don't have to make something big and extended and flowery and huge. It can be as simple as, this is the court of their majesties. Here's the people who are coming in. Now let's go. You're also going to do a recessional, which can be even less flowery. It can really just be as simple as, you know, this court is now closed, all rise. You got to remember to say this court is now closed, otherwise the court doesn't close, and technically the court's still open. Sometimes there's music, right? Like the local musical group will arrange to do choral music or something. Great, work with them. If they want to let you, you know, you can talk to them about how maybe their majesties want something read as the boast, and you're going to do it over their music. Hopefully that will work out. If it does, great. If it doesn't, either get them to pick something else or go back, you know, negotiate it out, figure it out. One way or another, you know, if they like music, then they'll be happy with the music too. That's something that gets done a lot as well. Okay, so now you go to your pre-court meeting. You're gonna make sure that everything's written down. Everything is written down. Every single thing that's happening in that court must be written down, because if it's not, you will forget it. Ask me how I know. Okay. You're going to show their majesties the authoritative list that you have made with the signet. You're going to include all of your non-awards business that you've received from them, and you're going to confirm the order of that. You're going to ask their majesties if they're adding anything, like fealties. This is frequently when you will find out that the Prince and Princess of North Shield are going to process into court too. You know, you hopefully will have some time to learn their names and take care of it. You're going to review all of their choices about their preferences. Again, this is how you want to call people into court. This is when you want me to start reading. This is the cheer you want me to use. Please confirm these things, Your Majesty. Right? Then that's going to end, and you're going to go and sit down with the other heralds who are heralding with you. I call them assistant in the document. That doesn't mean that they're your assistants. It means that they're assisting you with court, because you're not doing it alone, because doing court by yourself is usually not a great idea. You're going to talk to them. You're going to split up the names. You split up the order. People are going to have, sometimes people will say, oh, I know Bob. I want to do Bob's award. Sometimes they'll say, I don't care. I can do whoever you want. So you'll split it up. It's usually easiest to split it up into groups as opposed to going Herald 1, Herald 2, Herald 3, Herald 1, Herald 2, Herald 3, Herald 1, Herald 2, Herald 3. But whatever works for the group of you is whatever works. And there's no like set rules about that or anything. You can, as the herald in charge, choose to not actually do any yelling except for the boast, the processional and the recessional. And you can say, you know what, y'all figure it out. Split up the awards. Make sure you can pronounce your names. Come back to me with your list. Maybe you don't feel like it. Maybe you've already strained your voice. Maybe you know that you've got a big court coming up in a week. That's, 70 people, and you're going to have to do more courts together like that. There's all sorts of reasons why you might not want to do any actual in-depth heralding. It's fine. Whatever works for you is whatever works for you. Just figure it out with your group. So you review the list of names, or the list of business, really. Make sure everybody can pronounce the names, and you want to make sure that everybody can pronounce every name, because if something goes wrong, you want to be able to anybody to pronounce the name, just in case somebody has to step in, okay? Then you split up the pieces of business between everybody, and then hopefully you go and you warm up, because this is a performance. And though it is a scripted performance and you have everything written down in front of you, you are still going to be projecting, and you're still going to be pushing, and maybe the hall is absolutely awful, right? I don't know how many people went to Seto and Inez's crown tournament, but it was awful. I've never been told that I couldn't be heard at the back of a room before. Dimitri might have been able to handle it, but I've never been told that people couldn't hear me. I got asked to re-herald announcements. Never happened to me before. So, you know, you're going to push yourself. You need to warm up if you're going to do that. And again, we're not covering that in this class. We're not covering the actual vocal technique. There is a vocal technique class coming up, I think, in a couple of weeks on Sunday. On a Sunday, you can look at the calendar, the RUM calendar for that. Baron Ermenrich is teaching that class, and I'll be in attendance at that because I can always use more vocal warm-up techniques. Make sure everything is written down. Make sure everything is written down. Make sure everything is written down. Don't forget to write everything down. And then another reason why I like the plastic sheets is you can use a dry erase marker to cross things off, but you're not actually crossing them off. You are crossing it off on the plastic of the plastic protector. And then when you're done, you either, you know, maybe you throw the plastic protector away, or hopefully you can clean it off and you can use it again, and you're going to take that paper out because that court's over, and now you're going to use it again for a new one. All right, so performing the court, you got to take a deep breath, maximum effort. Remember the names of your king and queen. If you get nothing else right for the entire court, get that part right. All else is forgivable, generally. Okay? Check things off as you complete them one way or another, and you can do it. Everybody can do this to one level or another. Your comfort level is your own, right? You got to own your own comfort. But I believe that everybody has the capacity to be a court herald in one way or another. You got to know your space, and frequently you don't have the opportunity to do that. But everybody has that capacity. Okay. All right. So now court's over, right? And I'm going to stop, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions. Marquetta does not have any questions. Clara, Dimitri, any questions? Okay, all good. Fantastic. Okay, now you're going to report on the court, and here we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of court reporting. So I'm going to share my screen again. Let's do this. I'm going to share my screen. Share my screen. Share my screen. Where is it? Oh, really, where is it? I want to share. I'm going to click share screen. Phone pad. Here we go. Share. Okay, so this is the MidRealm website. And I'm going to close all these other tabs because they don't matter at this point anymore. Okay, so you come here. This is midrealm.org, and you're going to scroll down to the bottom, and you're going to click on Services Portal. And now you're going to log in. Everybody should have a login. Okay, you log in here. Now you're going to see stuff over here on this side that's more than what other people are going to see. When you log in, you're going to see something different than what you see on my login. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the RUM. I am also the Clerk of Precedence, so there's more stuff that I do than what other people do. So you're going to go to Court Reports, and you're going to click Create New Court Report. And you can see that this is a handy-dandy form. And what it doesn't include on this form are any of the recipients, because it's going to require that you fill out at least the red starred things here. Okay? You have to put in the date. You have to put in the name of the court. This is an appropriate way to name a court. Royal Court of Seto and Night. Okay? Here's another appropriate way to name a court. Royal Court of Seto and Inez, right? Here is a way to inappropriately name a royal court. Okay. Here's another inappropriate way to name a royal court. Is that a regency? Was Bob the only person on the dais? Was anybody else there? I was at that event and I saw the Queen. Why isn't it the Royal Court of the Queen? So you need to name it at, basically what I'm saying is that you need to name the court after the most senior person present. So if it is a court being held by the king and or queen, it is a royal court. If it is a court being held by the prince and princess, it is a regency court. If it is a court being held by a landed baron and baroness as a regency court, it is a regency court. We do not report baronial courts in this form. This is for mid-realm royal courts only. So it's a court that the king and queen were at, the prince and princess were at, or the baron and baroness are holding it as a regency for the king and queen. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, the baron and baroness are acting as the voice of the crown. And so it is a regency court, and it is reported here. Okay, so now the event list, you're going to put in one of the, you'll notice that a lot of these events are in the past, right? So you're going to either load more rows, right? And there's a lot of stuff back in here in the database. This is because we leave data in the database to allow for, people to go back and fix things later, right? Oh, this award also happened. I need to add it in. I'm going to go back and edit the court report or whatever, right? But here, for example, we can do court reporting on ethereal courts, right? So now the location is just a field, right? So it's the name of the group, or it's ethereal, or it's, you know, whatever, Penzic, that kind of thing. The event date, use the calendar pop-up. Don't type it in. If you type it in, you probably get it right, but the system will allow you to hold a court on Monday. If you bring up the calendar indicator, it's easier to see what the dates are. I actually put in a request to have the event date match up with the event name because those dates are in the system, and that works for everything except Penzic or Gulf Wars or a 2-day event like Baron Wars, or, I mean, there's lots of exceptions, right? So it can be potentially fraud because awards that are given on Monday at Penzic have precedence over awards that are given on Tuesday at Penzic. So it's not as easy as just tying the dates together, but I did ask if we could do that. You put in your name. This submission, there's no field here. That will get processed when you hit save and add recipients. Process to OP, no, because you're not done yet. Last update date, so you can go back and you can update court reports afterwards. So you can start the report and, oh my gosh, my kid fell down and cut their hand. I have to take them to the emergency room. Save, and you save it and you walk away and you can come back later. Maybe it's not so important. Maybe it's just dinner time, right? You can walk away and come back later and log back into the system and pick up where you left off. So but this will also let you go back and re-update the court afterwards. So because we've had problems where the court report doesn't get so when the court report is filed and you hit save and you hit submit at the end of it after you add all of the recipients, it sends an email, a blast email out to a group of people. If you could then go back and update that again, in the past it used to update the data on the website, but it wouldn't send the email out again. So the pale could potentially be wrong, and I, as the clerk of precedence, validate what's on the website against the email and what's in the pale, right? And if they don't match, then there's a problem, and I raise my hand and say, hey, wait a second, something's wrong. So we added this functionality in so that if somebody updates it, it will show this date, and another email will get sent, and it supersedes the previous email. So you're the reporting herald. Now you can technically file a report for other people. Okay, so there's all of these people who are listed as potential court heralds. I don't know if they're all actually legitimately court heralds or if this is just a list of every single person who's got a populous record. But you can file a report for somebody else if necessary. Generally, you're going to do it for yourself. You must fill out a reporting herald, just like you have to fill out a court name, just like you have to fill out an event date. Then you're going to put in the names of all the other heralds. You're going to put in the names of the seneschal. There may be more than one court signet, so you'll put in multiple names there if you need to, but at least one. And then notes. Notes is for the stuff that's not getting entered into the OP. So it's the Royal Court of Felix and Madalena. Their Majesties of North Shield were also on the dais. Moneyers Guild presented 2 pounds of the king's shilling. Bob won the rapier tournament, although I usually wouldn't include something like that. And then, Mary was placed on vigil for the order of defense. Vigiling is not an award. So vigil is not something that gets put into your recipients list. Vigiling is a ceremonial thing that occurs that kicks off the process of something that needs to be put into the OP, but you don't actually get put into the OP as a peer until after you've been recognized as a peer in court. It's put in the pail is published, and the pail is mailed, and it's received. So the pail is usually mailed on the first day of the month, and we usually process court reports on the 25th, for example. Okay, so now I'm gonna not save this because it's not necessary for me to save it. I'm just gonna hit leave. I'm gonna go back here, and I'm gonna do some sorting. So first I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so I can see what I'm doing, right? And we don't care about the processed courts, right? And you're seeing, in part, you're seeing this because I'm the clerk of precedence. But as you can see, we have a number of existing courts that are waiting to be processed, and some of them I have to take care of, but some of them haven't been processed because it just didn't show up in the pail, right? So this one is Royal Court of Seto Internes, and here's the event name, right? Or that's the event date. Here's the event name, right? So there's 1, 2, 3 actual events out there beyond the ethereal courts that we've done, right? Spring Coronation and some other things that still need to be processed. And I'm not sure that I've received all the court reports to process them, which is why they're still sitting here. But if we go into this practice and trial example, okay, so this is one that was created. Somebody was doing some practices from another kingdom, and we allowed them to use our system to get their stuff. So one thing that I want to note is that a court order of John is an invalid court order. Court orders must be numerical in nature. Usually the reason why that you do this is if you have more than one court in a day. So 1 is almost always the right answer because usually you don't have more than one court. But if you've had more than one court, you can type in 1 or 2 or 3. So if you do a silent court in the morning and you do a regular court in the afternoon, right, the silent court is 1 and the regular court is 2. Because technically the awards that were given in that silent court have precedence over the evening court. But I'll tell you a secret. If you suspend court and you don't close court, it's all one court. And so you put everything into one thing and you put in notes, hey, we did this in silent court. Okay, so now we're going to talk about entering people into the system, into here. So you can add rows, and it'll just do that for you, but you can click the Add Row button, and it'll add rows. And these X's are here because they have been filled out with, these are required fields, right? So usually you don't have to add those, but that's 1, right? And then you're going to search for the award that's been bestowed. So this is not something that you can type in by hand, okay? So if a new award gets created and somebody gets made the premier of that order, the court report can't be entered. This line item can't be entered until that's been created and put into the database. But say somebody's getting made a Doe's Grace. Now there's 2 kinds of recipients. There's existing recipients and there's new recipients. You always want to look for the person under existing recipients first. You're going to do a search. Again, you're not typing the name in, okay? It automatically brings up the search thing when you try to do that, okay? So you're going to do a search for the person, right? Hit search, and there's Marquetta of NRA and IRN, and I don't know, is that you, Marquetta?
Nope.
Nope, it's a Marquetta. So there's a Marquetta out there, and you're going to put their name in. If their name does not exist in the system, right? So let's say, I'm going to pick something that I'm hoping doesn't exist. Bob of Bob's. Bob, and I hit search, No results found. Okay, that means that the person does not have any entries in the order of precedence. So you're going to be creating their entry in the order of precedence by filing the report. And the way you do that is here. So say now this is number 2, right? And here is the Dragon's Barb for Bob of Bob of Bob, right? You're going to be creating, when you hit submit report, and then I go and process the report into the OP. When that happens, it will create a line item for Bob of Bob in the OP, and it should, I believe, create a populous record for him. And all it will say is SCA name is Bob of Bob, and here's the award. And I think maybe the date that the account was created. And it won't put anything else in there. It'll create an account name, obviously, like an ID, account ID. So if you have any notes that go into the in here, right? I'm gonna make this big just so I make sure that I've got everything there. Yes, okay. If you've got any notes, and you can put your notes in, Bob did the king solid during the tournament, brought him a beer, right? I mean, whatever. The notes are there to, usually what we use the notes for is if somebody's receiving a foreign award, and that does sometimes happen in court. So 3 could be, you know, their majesties give somebody else leave to do something, give a visiting royal something to do something. So they can give them a non-armigerous foreign honor. So that's the award bestowed, and then whatever their name is, you know, Larry. And then what we would put in here is, you know, King of North Shield gave Larry a Cruth for his limerick. Cruth is a bardic award, right? So this is where we put in the notes on what the award actually is, because we aren't going to list all of the different foreign honors out there. The award list would be enormous, right? So you can put that stuff in here, right? And it all goes in here. And then at the bottom of it, and finally, when you're done, you can hit Save Changes if you're not ready to submit the report yet. Just hit Submit Changes. And I mean, it wants you to fix things that are broken, right? So you can, this is where the interface gets a little wacky. We need to take an action, which would be to delete the selection, delete rows, right? And you sort of got to figure out how to make that go. If you've neglected to fill out a line item that has a red star, it will require you, it will say, please fill out this field, right? And then now I can save the changes, and now it's saved the changes, but this has not been submitted. There's nothing that's been submitted to me yet. And so if I go and I look at this, I'll see it, but it won't be ready for me to do anything with, okay? And so now I'm gonna delete these because we don't want them in here, because we don't want anything to accidentally happen. Delete rows. And now they're deleted. And I can save changes. And now they're gone. Okay? But that's filing your court report. Okay? So the key piece there is anything that doesn't go in there as an award is a note. Right? And here it talks about that stuff. Right? So anybody put on vigil, laws read into court, banishments, gifts, other nobility, lightning struck the building and we all had to leave and court was reconvened 4 hours later, you know, whatever goes in there is what goes in there, okay? And that's your thing there. And then we go back to the court reports, and I will go and I will show you what I do is I go into, let's see, let's pick the right one. Let's do this one. Oh, look. Yes, let's do this one. I will click process to OP when my pelican gets listed in the Pale, which won't be for another month. But what I do is I click process to OP, and then a process runs in the background. And so if we go and we look at my populous entry now, or yes, let's go look at my you can see people's awards in 2 different ways. You can see them in the order of precedence, and you can see them in the populous directory. So in the populous directory, it's just I'm not sure how this is sorted. It looks like it's sorted by SCA name, but it's not really, because M is not the first letter. But if I go and I look up Andreas here, and I go, it brings up everybody who's named Andreas. And if I click on the edit button, it will show my stuff. And while it says Magister, this is a text line item that somebody put in there for me. You will see under my awards, it does not list the Pelican. Okay, and it lists my offices. Not all of this is correct, and it lists any alternate names I have, past personas, whatever, right? So it doesn't list it here, right? So this is an export out of the OP. This is the OP. So now if I go click on Andreas here and I click go, it will list all of the Andreases, but it lists each award out individually. And the reason for this is I can create a unique line item here for somebody. So if an award somehow gets missed from the report and we find out about it 3 years later, we're not going to go and file a new court report. I'm going to come here. They're going to send me a picture of the scroll, right? And I'll go look and see if we can find it in our archives, try and figure out why it wasn't processed. And then I'm going to enter it manually here, right? If somebody comes in from out of kingdom, we will enter all of their non-MidRealm foreign awards this way as well, okay? But also I can go and I can edit these things individually. Oh, that evergreen, that's the wrong date. That wasn't April 2nd, 2016. That was April 9th, 2016. And I can go and I can edit it if I have to, change the date, right? So that's why the OP lists it out this way, whereas the person record lists it out this way. And from here, you can't change it here. And this is because I have access to this as a member of the populace, right? And I have some additional rights because of my role on the website. But more importantly, I cannot change somebody's OP, personal OP from here. I can only do it from the order of precedence, only if I have the rights to do it, okay? So when I click process, it will process that here. And what's a cool thing to do is to go into the order of precedence, and you can, there's an order of march link that lets you see what your membership is in the OP. And if you wait long enough and you click all, it's rendering a list of every single award that's ever been given in the MidRealm and what that OP is. And if we go, keep going, we're in the Laurels. Now we're in the Pelicans, right? So when we get down to the end of the peerages, right here, right? So currently, Ingolf is his number in the OP is 964, and of course, every new royal peer that gets made bumps him down one. And then we go from chivalry, we go from the least precedential peer to the most precedential court baron, right? So, for example, if we scroll down a ways and get closer to the bottom, let's see, a lot of names, a lot of court baronies. Oh, there we go. I went too far. You know, there's almost 1,000 Dragon's Hearts. It's almost 1,000 Dragon's Hearts. So let's see. Here's me. I'm 1253. I will only get bumped a couple of hundred spots on the OP, but eventually my name will, when I hit process on that report, my name will show up around here. That's all. That's what I'm getting at. That's how you can see how things move around in the database, right? So that's the way that works, and that's reporting. So when you're done, you click submit, and then I'll get the report, and I'll have a process to OP. This button doesn't show up on court reports that haven't been submitted, like we saw with the previous court report, right? It didn't have a process to OP button. I can't process it till it's here, till it's in this state, and then I hit process to OP, and it goes through. So that is the process of running a MidRealm royal court. From soup to nuts.